come all the way from Santa Barbara, and he's got to go through the wicked city between us and there. You know, he probably won't be able to come. And he said immediately, yes, I'll be there. When is it? And I'd love to come talk to the chapter. So tonight we have Matt Gilliams. Matt is the plant system. I never mess this. I always mess this one up.
Botanist.
The systematist. And the herbarium curator and the head botanist of the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden. He has a general focus in the study of all of California's floras, especially I think those in the southern half of the state. He earned his bachelor's and his master's degree from San Diego State University, and then he earned his doctorate in integrative biology from the University of California at Berkeley. He's been working as a botanist in California since 1998. I tried to figure out how many publications Matt has authored or co-authored, and I couldn't count that high. Probably 70, 80, I don't know. He's probably working on 20 more right now. So he's really, if there was a Mount Rushmore, if there's going to be a Mount Rushmore of Southern California botanists at some point, I think they need to reserve a spot for Matt. In addition to all of that, he's a really nice guy. And he likes to engage people. He likes to talk to people about nature and about plants, and that's what we're going to do tonight. So, Matt Gilliams.
Weird. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Awesome. Y'all are really feisty. It's a Thursday. It's pretty late. Y'all are pretty feisty. That's cool to see. I really appreciate all of you being here. And it's really great for me to be here. This is my first time coming to one of your chapter meetings. And what a cool building. And I got lost coming here. It's really dark. And, it's always an adventure going to a new place. This place is special. Anyway, thanks for having me. Before I forget, I brought a table full of things that might be interesting to look at. We're in a botanic garden, so easy for me to walk around and pull some of the endemic plants of Catalina Island to bring them here so that you can see them. Some of them are some of the rarest plants on Earth. There's only 7 individuals on Earth. So pretty cool plants over there. Also some stickers and other things if you wanted to take some of that stuff. Yeah, so my name's Matt. I work at the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden. I've had the privilege of being there for about 10 years or so, where I get to work on some of California's best plants and some of California's best places and with a really great group of people. I just want to start with an acknowledgement slide because there's nothing that anybody is doing that doesn't benefit from decades and decades of work that people have done before them. And I get to work with really great people in the present, including a bunch of great folks from Catalina Island Conservancy who have been my partners on studying Catalina Island for the last 10 years or so. My buddy Kristen, who was in Mike Simpson's lab at the same time as I was, way back in the day. She's also at the garden, and we collaborate on pretty much everything. And then as far as the Catalina Flora goes, the book project, I'd like to thank my co-authors, Steve Junak and Mark Aves, and a whole ton of island experts and taxonomic experts who have helped me throughout the years. So this has really been a team effort, and I get to be the one standing here, but this has really been a big team effort. All right, so we're going to talk for 40 or 45, 50 minutes, something like that. It's really helpful for a long talk to know where we're going. So we're going to Catalina, first off, but I'd like to start out really just by giving an introduction to the island and the plants of the island. I'll talk about recent efforts on the book project. And to start that off, talk a little bit about the botanical history of the island, the collecting history of the island, the people who have been there before, and who have laid the groundwork that we all benefit from. A very brief description of the book, and then kind of a new synopsis, floristic synopsis that has resulted from us being able to spend some time thinking about the flora of that island and then all of the islands of the archipelago. I'll talk about some of the rare, endemic, or new plants of the island in the kind of the back quarter, and then end. Rightly, all of us should be thinking about plant conservation, and I know that you do, but I'd like to end the talk by thinking about conservation on that island. First, how many of you have been there? Everybody. Okay, pretty much everybody. All right, well, let's just go home now. Anyone want to do the talk? So this is an incredible island. It's an incredible island in part because of how much people have engaged with it over the years. Pretty much every hand went up. I don't know if you were able to see that, but pretty much every hand went up. And on a clear day, or even not so clear a day, you can see this island from most places in this local area, right? It's only 20 miles off the coast of California. It's the largest in what we call the Southern Channel Islands, these 4 islands here. Kind of a loose grouping of islands. And that's opposed to the Northern Channel Islands, these 4 which are a much tighter grouping, and in fact historically were connected together during times of lower sea level. So it's the 3rd largest at about 75 square miles, behind Santa Rosa, 84, and Santa Cruz Island at 96 square miles. It's easily the most heavily visited of any of the Channel Islands. All of you have been there, but everyone's been there. 1 million people a year go to Catalina Island, and that's kind of a conservative estimate. And they go there for all the reasons we enjoy nature, and for some other reasons too. You know, recreation. It's an incredible place and a heavily visited place. The landform's amazing. Isn't it wonderful to have Google Earth and other other sources of readily available satellite imagery? It's a big island, 75 square miles, kind of oriented kind of southeast to northwest. A lot of coastline. A lot of rugged coastline, but also a lot of interior. You can really appreciate the topography of the island. A ton of canyons going all throughout the island. It's the only island with 2 permanent settlements on it, Avalon and 2 harbors. Maybe you've been to both of those. But a pretty special place with respect to landform. And then in terms of vegetation, this should kind of feel like your backyard. There's all of the species in coastal sage scrub vegetation, for example. These are all pretty much the ones that you know from your own backcountry here in Orange County. A lot of grassland on this island, and it's due in no small part to the fact that we still have large mammals on the island, non-native introduced mammals like bison. And bison and introduced mule deer are in effect browsing all of the new shrubs that would come up, all of the new oaks, island oaks, ironwoods, and really maintaining a lot of grassland. The grassland does have some native grasses like shade grass and Pulchra, but by and large, the grasses that you encounter there are going to be annual introduced European grasses like bromes and hordeum and avena. But this is not a place that's entirely devoid of native plants. There's still a lot of forbs, we call them, either annual or perennial herbs in this area. And again, a lot of these are ones that you recognize from your own backcountry. The woodlands and forests are really special. If you were down in a canyon bottom, you would recognize many of the plants that are there. You'd have willow riparian forest, willow scrub, platanus, and other things. So a lot of these groups of plants are ones that you would be familiar with. But as you start to creep uphill from canyon bottoms, this is where the vegetation becomes really island-specific and very special. These are the big 3 of the woody forest vegetation on the island. Ironwood, Lionophanes floribundus, subspecies floribundus. This is a single island endemic, a very, very special plant. We'll talk about that a little later. Catalina cherry, Cronus illicitifolia, subspecies Lyonii, and Quercus tomentella, which is a Channel Islands endemic. So really, really special. And if you were to, that's right, forward is down. Makes total sense. The island chaparral is really, really special. So in contrast to the coastal sage scrub, which has many, many plants that you'd be familiar with, the exact same genus and species, in the island chaparral we have many genera that you're familiar with, Ceanothus, Quercus, Rhamnus, Arctostaphylos, and so on. But the dominant members of island chaparral on Santa Catalina Island are all island endemics. Ceanothus arboreus, a plant that can be, triple head high, almost tree-like, as the specific epithet would allude. Quercus pacifica, beautiful island scrub oak. It has a Rhamnus and an Arctostaphylos. And the Arctostaphylos is a single island endemic on Catalina. So the chaparral on those kind of moister north-facing slopes, really, really special. So I'll tell you a little bit about the botanical history of the island, but I'd be remiss for not saying that the Tongva gabrielino were present on the island, are present on the island for many thousands of years. I'm going to talk about the beginning of Western science's documentation of plants of that island, but I just want to point out that native peoples have been interacting with the plants of that island for a long, long time. Floristic work on the island began with William Gamble. So how many of you have ever seen a Gamble's quail? or know of a Gamble squid. If you haven't, that's it right there. Or maybe you can think of a genus that was named after William Gamble. Gambelia. Yeah, so William Gamble was, in 1847 was the first person to collect plants on any of the Channel Islands, and it happened on Catalina. He didn't collect a ton, but what he collected were interesting plants. I'm just going to go through a few of the main characters here. At roughly the same time, we had a pair of people who were LA residents, Lyon and Nevin. You might know Lyon from Lyon Ophthalmus, and Nevin. There were many, many plants named after Nevin. They visited a few different times in the late 1800s. And then Townsend and Cape Randy were some of the main early explorers on the northern Channel Islands, but also visited some of the southern Channel Islands. Blanche Trask is perhaps the most important botanical collector around this time, and so many plants were named after her. She moved to the island, so she lived on Avalon, or on the island in Avalon, from around the late 1800s and collected there until 1907. She was married to a lawyer. As far as I know, the lawyer never lived on Catalina with her. She got married. This is a smart person. She got married and then instantly moved to the island and basically botanized as a really, really important botanical explorer for over a decade. Blanche Trask is pretty famous for kind of bucking conventions. So this is part of how she dressed when she went out. She had leather breeches. She didn't wear the long skirt that was customary of the day. She had a staff that looks like a rendo, actually. So she was doing her part to eradicate non-native plants there. But she got all over the island, and Jepson said of her that when he went to the island, he was so impressed with her because she knew every plant as an individual. Not just she knew where to find it, but she knew individual plants. Jepson did individual plants that he was curious about. So really, really an incredible person. We're not the first people to be trying to come up with something synthetic across the island. There were actually two previous efforts to do this. One was by Millspaw and Nuttall, and so this was published in January of 1923. And this is a full book-length flora. I have a copy of it over there if you wanted to take a look at it. Keys and everything. It's a pretty cool book. And then Bob Thorne, who was at Cal Botanic Garden or Rancho Santa Ana Botanic Garden, did a voucher-based checklist that he published in 1967 of the island, and really greatly advanced what we know of the island. He collected, he was just an indefatigable collector, and collected just a ton on the island over many, many trips. This is one of my favorite pictures of my buddy Steve, who is there on the left, Steve Junak, and Mark Hayes. Mark was the director of the Wrigley Botanic Garden for a lot of years and lived out on Catalina, collected a ton. This is from the Island newspaper from 1999, and this was announcing that they were writing a new book in 1999. And it's actually the same book that I'm working on. All right, 25 years later. It's really pretty amazing, But I think that just goes to show that it really takes a lot of effort to do something like this. Steve, who was my predecessor at the garden for a long, long time, fantastic person, an expert on California's island flora. He made over 50 trips to Catalina between 1978 and the present. It's around 55 or so trips at this point. Collected all over the island, and between what he collected and what Mark collected, we have an incredible trove, a real legacy of botanical exploration, and a lot of what we know about the island we owe to these two. So pretty darn cool. That newspaper article. So. Tell you a little bit about the book and the idea of it. How many of you have seen the Santa Cruz flora? Oh, not so many. Okay, that book is actually kind of difficult to find. I brought a copy of it also. But the flora of Santa Cruz Island really, the garden has the copyright to that particular book, and Steve was the main author on that. And so it was really a launching off point for working on the flora of Catalina Island, kind of a guiding document. And just like the flora of Santa Cruz Island, the Catalina flora is a full technical flora. So it's very similar to the Jepson manual in that we have technical treatments of all the families, genera, and all of the lower taxa that are on the island. Unlike the Jepson manual, it's fully illustrated. So really, really cool. I brought some of the plates, laser pointer on the plate there. Brought some of the plates that the botanical illustrator Linda Vorvik did. So she illustrated every single kind of plant that's out there. There's something like 200 plates of illustrations in the book. Really, really cool. And even if you don't plan on keying any plants, you might still be interested in the book because of the front and back matter for the book, which goes over the island's climate and land use history and vegetation, written by subject matter experts. So not just this guy, but lots of people who know things. So it's pretty neat. When is the book coming out? Well, I think Ron was hoping it would be here today. I was hoping it would be here today. But the good news is that the main body of it, all of the descriptions and stuff like that, that's been complete for a long time. Linda wrapped up her illustrations. Those are all done. Most of the intro chapters are done, and we have a cover design that I'm really excited about. I just have one chapter left. This is on my plate to do, the floristics chapter, and then we have the layout. We were in the layout phase, but our person doing our layout actually passed away recently. It's a very tragic occurrence. So that took us offline for a little bit, but we're eager to get going again here very soon. This is what the cover looks like. It's very bold. It's very bold. I really like it. This is the person who did this calls this a peekaboo cover because the inner cover looks like that.
Wow.
So isn't that cool?
Yeah.
That's obviously, I can take no credit for this. This is the work of Marie Gonzalez, who is an incredible. She does all the work for Theodore Payne, and she's just not only is she an incredible person, but just a really, really gifted artist and layout person. So really excited. We're just going to do the last little bit of the layout. Almost there. So in the process of doing a book like this, the starting point is a big table. You can kind of imagine if you were to circumscribe some area that you wanted to do, some kind of summation work like this over, whether it's a parcel in your own backcountry or some part of the Cleveland National Forest. You define your area, and then you go through and begin to make a big table of all of the different plants that have ever been collected there. And that's really the starting point for this. In doing that, at the very end, you've got a great big table that tells you all the plants from your island, but all the plants from the other islands too, which was part of this effort. So let's put the three biggest islands into context here. So I've got Santa Cruz Island at 96 square miles, Santa Rosa Island at 84, and Santa Catalina Island here, the third biggest at 75. And the first thing to notice there is that Catalina Island has the greatest taxonomic richness of any channel island. So it's, as of calculations from 2 nights ago, 708 taxa, that's the number that we've treated in the book. And by unit area, so if we were to kind of divide the total by the island area, we have around 9.44 plants per mile square. And that's, that's on order. The native plants are really on order, same order of magnitude as the biggest island, Santa Cruz Island. That's pretty cool. But the total plants are really different. And what is that because of? Well, that's because Catalina has got vastly more non-native plants on that island than the other ones do. So if you look at the percent native of the island, it is the lowest of the three. And you could probably guess why. I mean, this is a million people a year go there, so we have new non-native plants that are showing up on that island pretty much all the time. And the Conservancy is doing everything that they can to detect those rapidly, detect them right away when they get there, and then to have a rapid response to them, just like right? Well, when you have that big table, then you're curious. It is in fact the case that for islands that are near to a continent, the general idea is that the typical island biogeographic tenets don't apply very well to them. They're so close to the mainland that we don't expect them to behave like islands. Hawaii is an island chain that is supposed to behave like an island. But let's see, how well do they follow classic island biogeographic tenets? So if we were to boil MacArthur and Wilson's island biogeography down into two statements, the first one would be bigger islands will have more species than smaller islands in general. Okay, so let's, in our little cartoon here, we have our mainland of California, just a random assortment of islands. For islands that are equivalent distances apart, the bigger island is going to have a greater number of plants. This is what MacArthur and Wilson would say. And then the other tenet is that closer islands will have more species than farther islands if the islands are the same size. And so here's two islands of equivalent size, and the one that's closer is going to have more species in general than the one that's farther away. And so this is just because they're closer, it's easier to disperse there. Okay, how well is this hold up? So a buddy who's a biologist, Ben Carter, a grad school buddy, and I put our lists together. He had his moss list, his bryophyte list, and I had my plant list. And so we wanted to basically explore whether or not these island biogeographic tenets hold true. And it is in fact the case. Bigger islands, bigger of our channel islands, we'll just focus on the seed plant line here. Bigger islands support a greater number of plants over here. So here's the island size. Bigger islands have a greater number of species. Pretty cool. So far, it seems like the channel islands are behaving like islands. Oops. Okay, well, what about distance to the mainland, right? So it should be the case that closer islands have got more species, and that's true too. So we should expect that as we get farther away from the mainland, that we should have fewer and fewer species, and that is the trend that we see here. One thing that MacArthur and Wilson didn't talk much about is heterogeneity, island heterogeneity. And so we are using island elevation, maximum elevation, as a proxy for heterogeneity. And the idea here is that in a more heterogeneous environment, lots of ecological niches, there'd be less extinction over time. So this, in fact, turns out to be true as well, strongly significant, with islands that have the highest max elevation also have the greatest number of species. Pretty cool. But another thing we can do is subject that entire data matrix, we can subject it to an ordination analysis. And when we plot the results of a principal components analysis, they basically tell us, given this huge island matrix, species by island, which islands have the most similar floras. And so that's pretty neat. So looking across the entire flora, you can see here Santa Rosa and Santa Cruz, two northern channel islands adjacent to each other and formerly connected in times of lower sea level, have a very similar flora. That makes total sense. That was a good thing to see. And then our two large southern islands, Clemente and Catalina, also have very similar floras. So that was when we looked across the entire flora, but what about some of the special plants from the islands? Do any of those help to show these same biogeographic affinities? So I'm just going to go through 5 or 6 of the biogeographic patterns and show you a couple of the cool island plants that help us to display that pattern. So Catalina and Clemente, these are in the previous slide, those were the two that were, when you look across the entire flora, are the most similar. And there are plants that are only found on those two islands. So a great example of that is Phacelia lyonii. So this is named after Lion, the same person as Lion the Famous. That's a pretty cool Phacelia that's only found on those two islands. Believe it or not, and this is a really difficult thing for me to wrap my head around sometimes, but there are a number of plants that are on Catalina, Clemente, and also on Guadalupe Island, which is a volcanic oceanic island about halfway down the Baja California Peninsula and way out in the ocean. So a great example of that is Strophilaria villosa, a CNPS list 1B2 plant. Super, super beautiful. Villos means kind of long spreading hairs with long spreading hairs. You can see that really, really shows it well there. This is a really neat pattern. So Santa Catalina Island plus the Palos Verdes Peninsula. So are you all aware that the Palos Verdes Peninsula was an island back in the, at times of higher sea level? You can kind of see it sticking up there. At times of a higher sea level, this entire basin would have been filled with water, and it was the 9th channel island. And there are, in fact, 2 different plants that would be island endemics if not for very tiny little populations that persist on the Palos Verdes Peninsula. Crossosoma californicum, list 1B2, just an absolutely remarkable and beautiful plant. If you've never seen that plant, that should be one on your botanical tourist list for going to Catalina. It's really, really common there, but just a really remarkable plant. And the Dudleya virens, subspecies insularis, also known from Catalina in one little spot there, or a small gathering spots. This one is a head scratcher. Catalina Island and the San Ynez Mountains. So I only know of 2 plants that have this pattern. One of them is Eridicion traskii. One subspecies, Smithii, is here, and the other one, traskii, is on Catalina. How weird. The other one is Linicera subspicata, variety subspicata, also a list 1B. And these are pictures from about 3 weeks ago, and the plant is just an absolute ringer for the stuff that's in my neighborhood. So really defies all of my intuition about where plants should be, and why on earth wouldn't these plants be in the Santa Monica Mountains or in some of these other areas here? So maybe look for I don't think the area breakdown would have been this, but maybe Linus or SS cicada, maybe look for that in your backcountry. A really cool plant. And then of course Catalina, there's a number of plants that are widely distributed endemics across the Channel Islands, and a good example of that is Ceanothus aureus. So we just use a lot of endemic plants to describe some of these biogeographic patterns, but what does it mean to be endemic to a place? If you were to look at the definition, it would say to occur in a particular region, but everything grows in a particular region, right? So usually when we're saying endemic, when we want to call attention to an endemic plant, we really need to be limited to a particular, usually pretty small region, right? Otherwise, we might just say it grows in North America. We wouldn't necessarily say it's endemic. You could say that, but most people are talking about small regions. So Catalina is loaded, absolutely loaded with endemic plants. So there are 10 plants, here's a list of them here, that are single island endemics, including an additional +1 there for a plant that was that should be an island endemic based on genetics that hasn't been split off yet. If you were to it's exciting. If you wanted to, you could add in the plants that are on Catalina and also on some of the other Channel Islands. That'd be another 16 plants that are on Catalina and some of the other Channel Islands. And then if you wanted to add in endemics that are across the California Islands, so this includes the Baja California Islands, you would have an additional 13 plants. So that's 39 island endemics. When you're running across Catalina, you could potentially encounter 39, or when this additional taxonomic work is done, up to 40 island endemics in your hike. And it would be very likely that you would encounter at least 20 on your hike because they're common ecologically. Okay, so endemism. Be limited to a particular place. Well, endemism really does take two different forms, and there are really great examples of both forms on Catalina. So here's another cartoon. Let's talk about neo-endemism first. So neo-endemism is the idea that a plant disperses, is brought, or otherwise is found in some local conditions that they adapt to. So adapting to that particular area could result in speciation, and that would have been a recent thing. So let's say we have a plant here on the mainland. That plant is carried by a bird, on the inside of a bird, over to the Channel Islands. It gets established, they're the same color, so that means they're the same species still at this point. And then let's say once they're there, birds moving around a little bit more, and then time passes. So time passes, so maybe botanists consider these to still be the same taxon, but these things over here become different enough that taxonomists recognize them as different species. So this would be Darwin's finches, or this would be Eriogonum giganteum across the range. So that's neo-endemism, and it's often recent, geologically recent. Paleoendemism is a whole different mechanism. So let's say that we have a widely distributed plant. Let's say this is Toyon or some other plant that's broadly distributed in some area on the mainland and also on the islands. And then things change. Climate changes. Maybe this is 5 million years ago, the mid-Miocene thermal optimum. It's warm, it's wet. Things change. It's colder now, right? As our Mediterranean climate becomes more firmly entrenched, we're not getting summer rains anymore. The range of the thing is shrinking down smaller and smaller. And pretty soon, we have plants that are limited just to this one place where they can eke out a living. And so this does not involve speciation, and this is often an ancient event, these plants being limited to this place. And for that reason, we often call them relics. Does that make sense? Awesome. Okay. So we have some great examples of neo-endemism on the Channel Islands, and some really world-famous, excellent examples of paleo-endemism too. These are ones that we've been lucky enough to work on at the garden. So this is Nava acergenta flora. Is it your favorite of the Channel Islands plants? It's awesome. So if you haven't grown it, it grows amazing in your garden. It flowers year-round. It brings hummingbirds all year long to your garden. It's an incredible plant. I would encourage you to grow it. So 10 years ago, when I started writing the flora, these former Lavateras, there used to be two species in Lavatera, two subspecies of Lavaterra acergentiflora, subspecies acergentiflora and subspecies glabra. But they weren't recognized anymore when they were transferred to the genus Malva. So we quickly, on the basis of morphology, made a couple of new names. Those new names will be in the next Jepson manual update, so that's coming in just a couple of months. And this is where they're distributed. So we have some plants, subspecies acergentiflora on the northern Channel Islands. I brought in, sorry, I got you right in the chest with this. There's an example of that one over there that you can look at later. And then there's the southern island, subspecies glabra. And we're happy to see, we did some genetics work on this plant, and we were really, really happy to see that this northern Channel Islands and southern Channel Islands split was maintained, or not maintained, was also present in the genetic data that we recovered. But if you're looking at the slide, you can see also that there's another grouping in the southern Channel Islands, which is pretty neat. A real tight grouping of Santa Clemente Island and Santa Catalina Island. So these data suggest differentiation in the southern Channel Islands too, which is really, really neat. So this is a great example of neoendemism, 3 different species, or 3 different taxa of Malva acergentiflora, and it's pretty robust to different kinds of analyses. So these are all genetic data, different kinds of analyses, and you can see 3 different groupings on the first slide, on this slide, and on this slide. So pretty darn neat. It's so precious. That was for the plant, right? So I agree, Malva's just the cutest plant. It also hangs out with super cute foxes. This is a transition slide before something bad happened. So now you're all happy. But neoendemism, so you can imagine something is evolving into a small place. And then imagine humans have been affecting the biodiversity of the Channel Islands for a long, long time. The Spanish, when they came through, put pigs and goats on the islands. They wanted to be able to stop back by those islands. Hopefully the pigs and goats had reproduced a lot. And they were hoping to have a source of fresh meat on the islands. We also had the ranching era on the islands, where people had sheep and cattle on the islands. So really, the story of neoendemics on the islands is one of limited distribution followed by subsequent loss and hopefully recovery. In the case of Malva acergentiflora, I just told you that from our genetic data that the plants from Catalina are genetically distinct, that we ought to recognize them as a new taxon. On Catalina, it is only known from 2 places. Bird Rock, 100 plants, right there. So just go back and forth here, just to grab hold of the point. This is a very tiny rock. With sea level rise and a king tide, you could easily imagine a freak wave coming over the top of that. It's not very high. And then Indian Rock, here, where there were formerly tons of plants, and there's now about 5 plants, 5 to 10 plants. So the entire known range of this very special plant is 2 offshore islets. It's a really sobering thing. So, for our neoendemics, the first step for all of this is somebody's got to be paying attention. So floristics work, I say it all the time, floristics work is conservation work. You have to understand biodiversity in order to take steps towards conserving it. And the work here on this plant is sobering, but the plant grows really well. So this is a call to action for the Conservancy, who are growing. The Conservancy is growing it in the native plant nursery and is hoping to put it around the island. Okay, what about paleoendemic genus? So I brought an example of Lionophanes floribundus that's over here. If you've never seen that one, it's not much in horticulture. You might be more familiar with Asclepium folius, the northern form, and the one that's on Clementi. But what a cool plant. Why is it a paleoendemic? How do we know that? Well, there was a great study by Diane Irwin and Shorn in 2000. So these are all fossil locations, mid-Miocene, 15, 20 million-year-old locations, where Lionophanes, that looks exactly like the northern form Lionophanes, was found in rocks, way out into that. So we know that this plant was formerly very widespread. So think of my cartoon where there was a plant that was formerly very widespread. But its present day distribution at the genus level is just these 4 channel islands right there. This is a big tree. I'm sorry about that. But this is a tree of Rosaceae, or the rose family. One particular grouping of the rose family. This was done at Dan Potter's lab at Davis. So you're really going to have to squint in order to see. But where's Lionothamnus is on there? There it is, Lionothamnus. In order to get a sense for how old Lionothamnus is, they've got a scale bar there. And we would want to take this lineage that leads to Lionothamnus and go back to its common end where it connects up with other extant Rosaceae. And it turns out it's this huge group of Rosaceae. So this gigantic, big, diverse group that includes the cherries and plums and all kinds of things that we as humans enjoy. Big, huge, diverse group. Lionothamnus is evolutionarily sister to this group. That is really, really neat. And that means that it came off of its the common ancestor with that group right about there. And that's 90 million years ago. So the lineage that leads to Lionothamnus is 90 million years old. So not only do we have this fossil data from extant fossils, that always feels good. You can spill coffee on a fossil, it's a real thing. But when you use molecular dating techniques, you can go back 90 million years to where it connects up with its next closest relative, Rosaceae. That is really, really darn cool. Here's where Lionothamnus floribundus occurs on Catalina Island. It's everywhere, right? Many collections are there, but if you were to collapse those into groves, that's only 200 historically. Plants aren't producing seed in nature very much. Basically, almost no seed production. That's pretty strange. A potential explanatory variable there is that trees in a grove are often genetically identical. This is a clonal plant. So when you go into a grove of ironwood, all of those stems are coming off of the same rootstock underground. Right, so this is pretty sobering. And instead of 200 groves now, the Conservancy believes there's around 110 groves. So this is a recipe for this plant not doing too well into the future, right? And so again, this is having a group focus on the floristics of an area helps to reveal these kinds of patterns, and then you can take steps towards trying to conserve them, which the Conservancy has been doing for a while now. Our hope here in this next year is to develop better genomic resources so we can understand the relationships between the groves. I'm really excited about trying to determine how old the groves are, which is really just more of a matter of curiosity, and it'd be amazing to know how old some of these very ancient groves are. And then to establish some ex situ conservation groves at the garden. But all that's genetic stuff. It's basic floristics and herbarium work is still really, really critical part of the story. Just over the last 5 or 6 weeks, myself and a Conservancy member have been going around looking at basically the fall flora of these reservoir margins. So this is one of the very nicest looking reservoirs. There's many dozens of reservoirs on the island. And just our tiny bit of work turned up 2 new taxa for the island, one that's native, Bauhaus marina, which is a native aquatic plant, and then this non-native Ludwigia peploides. So pretty neat, just a very tiny amount of work, getting out there, looking at the island, turns out new things all the time. We also help to really change or better understand the distribution of some non-native grasses in these places too. So just basic boots on the ground stuff is still really important. This is the kind of summation conservation part. All of this has been conservation, but this is sort of the summation part. An interesting thing, I couldn't have appreciated this prior to working on a book, but imagine you as an end user of the book. You're flipping through, and let's say for Toyon, I list 10 places where Toyon occurs. You would assume that Toyon is doing great on the island. I might say in the book that it's common, and I might list a bunch of places where it occurs. Well, if I said that, it would only be because I've had the ability to study all of the specimens where the plant occurs, try to get a sense for temporally when those specimens were collected, if they've been collected recently. And the boots on the ground part of this really lets you know, hey, this plant is doing well, it's declining, or we really have something to worry about. And just looking at the specimens by themselves wouldn't tell you that. You kind of need the whole effort. So I'm kind of beginning to think of these plants of the island, the flora of the island, as all of the taxa existing on this kind of continuum of risk, where some of them really came out funny looking, didn't it? The point here is that you've seen blue on the map, lots of blue. That means we're looking at a plant like Artemisia californica that is basically on every single one of the Channel Islands, and it's also very widespread and common on the mainland. So this is a plant that is doing just fine. We call it healthy, and hopefully I would describe it that way in the book. There are plenty of plants on the island that, even if they have a CNPS ranking, like Crossosoma, maybe it's present in many stands on the island. We know present day, it's fine, it's reproducing just fine, it's in dozens and dozens of places. Even though it's a near island endemic, we're not too worried about it, right? And so that would be the next step down, this next artificial step down. Kind of in the middle here would be plants that, maybe they're only on a few of the islands. They're island endemics, but there's really not that many stations of them at all. Maybe we know of 10 or 15 stations on Santa Cruz Island, maybe we know of 10 or 15 stations here. These are ones that we are going to want to keep an eye on. And this kind of floristic work gives us that insight. It lets us know here's some plants that even though we may have dozens of specimens of them, we only have 10 populations on each island. Okay. And then there's these ones that are really darn near extirpation or extinction. And I brought one of these for you. So Cercocarpus traski is over here. If you've ever tried to key out Cercocarpus in the Jepson manual, you encounter Cercocarpus traski and you try to understand what it might look like. If you ever want to know, it's just right there. I can compare and contrast that one for you so that it pops out easily. The Cercocarpus traski is only known from 7 plants on Earth. It's only in one canyon, Wild Boar Gully, on Catalina. Now, so this is one that people have spent considerable time studying, and everyone knew Cercocarpus traski was very, very rare. Genetics has been done on that, a number of things. And I would say that probably if you were to ask people from the Conservancy or other folks who know the islands well, they would put these 4 in that category. Now, writing the flora, the thing that was most sobering to me is that there's a ton of other plants we can put in that category. A lot of these are rare or uncommon on the mainland, but are really darn near extirpation on the Channel Islands. And so these are ones, this Areastrum, this is an Areastrum that's on the mainland, but no one's ever investigated if this Areastrum on Catalina is distinct or not. Is it different? We don't know, and we don't know because we're not studying it, because we think it's a common plant. But all of these are plants that are really darn rare. And I put Malvasser digiflora, we've already talked about this plant, but it's only known from 2 stations on that island, right? This is the other plant that meets the taxonomic description there, Xylococcus. Okay, now what about extinction? Extinction or extirpation on the island. This is so many botanists' white whale, Diplochus traski. This is one that was collected by Trask a long, long time ago, over 100 years ago. So
I was saluting.
Okay. Yeah, so an annual plant, a really tiny little Diplochus. We have no idea where this is the island centroid. We have no idea where Trask collected it. But there are a bunch of other plants that haven't been collected in decades on the island. And these would include some plants that are legitimately rare. Lycium brevipes was a single island endemic known from just one colony above Avalon. That colony's gone now. That was a single island endemic. And a whole ton of other plants that are California native plants that you might know from your own backyard, but are no longer present on that island. So this for me is sort of the sobering message, but the exciting message here is that once we're aware of the issue, the conservation issues with these plants, then it's on our radar. Then we're looking for it. So this is Polytomasiae, or Dysanthelium californicum, is just one of the best stories of the Channel Islands. So this is a plant. This was collected by Gamble. This is one of the few plants that he collected in 1847. First collection of this Dysanthelium californicum ever. Shortly thereafter, Palmer collected it on Guadalupe Island. And then Blanche Trask, our botanical hero, collected it on San Clemente in 1903. It was presumed extinct for over 100 years. And then basic botanical work, like the work that we're doing, vegetation monitoring, in 2005 turned up this weird grass. No one knew what it was. This is my boss, Denise Knapp, was one of the people who found it. She was working on the island at the time, took it to Travis Columbus at Rancho Santa Botanic Garden. It's like, we found this thing that's been presumed extinct for over 100 years. Then it was on people's radar. They found it in 6 more places on Catalina. And then as soon as they knew what they were looking for, they found it in another place on San Clemente Island. So again, once we have done this, gathered these baseline data, we're doing this basic botanical research, we can have these things on our radar and people can be looking for them. So that's super, super exciting. And that's a take-home message that I hope is a positive one. That's exciting. Okay, oh wait, I'm going the wrong way. That's why. Down is forward. Okay, last 2 slides. Summary slide number 1. This is a point that I hope you take home. Catalina is an incredible place for botany. It's very accessible. You can see a ton of island endemics with very little effort. We've got a new flora on the way that we're really excited about. This island is wonderful for botany. It's got a huge number of plants. I hope I convinced you that island biogeographic tenets apply to our islands just as well as they might apply to a place like Hawaii. Catalina is rich with endemic species, almost 40 endemic species on that island, all very, very easy to see, most pretty easy to see. But our new research, which is just scratching the surface, shows us that there's so much more to know about this place, even this very well-botanized place. Summary point number 2, conservation stuff. Biodiversity work, basic work like what I do, is conservation work. We were able to review every single species on the island and herbarium specimens of things that, anything that was collected within the footprint of Catalina, we were able to go look at. When we started looking at the species for the islands, it revealed research needs. So Nava acergentiflora is a great example of that, where all of the plants of the whole archipelago were going under one name for a long time. But we have 3 entities out there. We've added a number of new species based on herbarium study and fieldwork, including just 5 weeks ago. And I think that this flora will be hopefully a pretty useful tool for on-the-ground work. What I showed on these last handful of slides was just this flora-wide conservation risk assessment is made possible by an effort like this. And we have a surprising number of conservation targets at every single one of those risk levels, especially that potentially extinct and near extinct level on the islands. And there's really a rather large and a soberingly large number of plants added to that possibly extinct list or extirpated. But just remember the story of Poa tomasiae. There's opportunities at every single risk level, and my hope is that with some additional effort that we bring some of those back from that sort of extirpated category. So that's what I've got. I'd like to leave here, just leave the acknowledgement slide up here because the botanical work in an area is always an incredible team effort, a group effort, and I'm really grateful for all the collaboration and grateful for your attention. Thank you.
Matt's agreed to stay for a couple of hours and take questions. Any questions for Matt? And at the end of the meeting, don't jump out too quick. We have another special announcement too. So, questions for Matt?
Well, I guess it was in the news that the attempt to get mule deer off the island was torpedoed. When we had our group, our chapter did a special trip out there, and they showed all these high deer fences that they were trying to protect. This is a real problem, I would tend to think.
I agree.
And what's the plan to try to deal with it within the politics?
Right. Yeah, so I don't speak for the Conservancy, and I'm not sure what their perspective is in this moment. I think that there was considerable public pressure from people who value, the deer have value to a lot of people. And I think that the Conservancy was trying to be sensitive to that while also exploring a deer reduction technique that they'll apply for now. But I don't know what the future plan is. I know the Conservancy has multiple constituencies that they're working with, and that's not an easy job. I will point out that you probably observed, so he's mentioning that on the island, as part of a sort of experiment, they put up deer exclusion fencing in certain areas, and it is from excluding deer from those areas, it's very, very clear what the island vegetation should look like in those areas. It recovers, it's beautiful, double and triple head high chaparral, loaded with endemic species. So the deer have a clear effect, and at this point, it's just a matter of trying to balance all the competing interests out there, I think.
You should be a politician.
It's not, it's not my decision out there, and really, to get the straightest answer would be to ask their concerns personally, I think. Yeah.
You mentioned that all Catalina Island plants are only known from the bird rock and island rock. You know why that is?
Yeah, those are two places where the deer couldn't get. Yeah, so these, if you've grown this in your garden, have you ever had a gopher eat the whole thing overnight? So I have. I had a gopher. I built a gopher cage around the malva in my front yard. And the cage went up 1.5 feet, and a gopher climbed up the thing and ate the entire thing in one sitting. So they're really juicy. They're succulent, kind of like Leptocyne, the giant coreopsis. They store a lot of water in the stems, and they're just delicious. So I think it'll be important to put them in, to install them on the mainland of Catalina in a place where the deer can't get, or to have no deer on the island.
I have a California desert tortoise, and it's his favorite thing to eat, but he eats very slowly.
Yeah, they're
Delicious.
yeah, they're not only do they have lots of water, not only do they not have a lot of structural components like secondary components, but a lot of island plants lose their chemical defenses going out to the islands, and so I would imagine it's just kind of like spinach.
I bought a plant recently, and I always mess up the genus named Epilobium. So Schneer is another,
Oh, Epilobium canum? Yeah.
and the species name is Catalina. So should I expect that was originally from the island?
It's probably a selection.
It is called cultivar.
Yeah, cultivar. Yeah, probably a wild selection from Catalina, but I don't know the origin of that one. But yeah, I would reckon. Yeah, a lot of plant wild selections take the name and the place they're from. Princess, like the Lamus condensatus princess plumes from Prince Island.
Mike Evans and Jeff Bond selected that on Catalina and named it Catalina.
There you go.
That's your one horse.
Yeah.
I was just gonna ask about Cercocarpus trasky. When we buy that at a nursery somewhere, does that mean that it's been taken from cuttings, or are there male and female plants, or is that a monoecious plant? How does that work?
That's a really good question. So Cercocarpus trasky is it's in Wild Boar Gully, one place. The plants are basically at the bottom of this little drainage. And on the sides of the drainage are Cercocarpus vegeloides, variety blanchii, another island endemic. And they grow right next to each other, and they hybridize. So this is partially why people have been so concerned about Cercocarpus trasky, down to just 7 individuals on the planet and surrounded by a congener with whom it makes seeds. The material that you would have purchased, I think it's probably from seed, and probably not from cuttings. It's grown on Catalina, and the one that we have is from seed from Catalina. I think it does fine from cuttings too. Maybe there's horticulturalists in the audience who might know. Ours is from seed, the one that I took that cutting off.
I know when some people have called about whether it's trasky or whatever, Mike has always said, like, well, where did it originate from? Because you should know where the seed was originated from. So, like, you know, the botanic garden is like, oh yeah, it's probably that. But if it's from somewhere else that doesn't have a lineage, most places that grow it should have a trail of where it originated from. And unless it's a seed source from the island, it probably is not true. Because they hybridize so easily.
Maybe 1 or 2 more. Yep.
I imagine the large mammals on the island that have been introduced eat some of the invasive plants there as well. So would you guess that in the case of removal somehow of all the mule deer or bison, would there be issues
specific winners that could be native, native winners in that trade-off between having the exotic animals there versus not. But exotic plants are not going to thrive when the mule deer and bison, well, I don't think that there's a question of taking the bison off. The bison aren't reproducing, it's a tiny herd. They don't impact the island the same way the mule deer do. But when the mule deer are gone, the chaparral plants are incredible competitors, and they will quickly overtop any annual plants. So I think that there may be in the conversion of non-native grassland over to chaparral to woody vegetation. I think there could be some native herbs maybe that kind of decrease in prevalence on the landscape, but those plants would also be present in that kind of grassland, shrubland mosaic. So I don't think we have to worry about any of those plants being lost or anything. It would just be an incredible net positive. Yeah.
I noticed you didn't address the removal of the goats. We noticed over the years that in general, a lot of the plants grew back after they removed the goats in particular. And I'm wondering, did you guys look at any of that plant recovery over the years in terms of removing not even large animals?
Yeah, I think every bit makes a difference, and you're right. Removing goats, dealing with pigs, those kinds of things have their positive impacts. I think, at least in the time that I've been working on this over the last 10 years, there's really been a deer that have been front and center. So it is true that we shouldn't lose sight of those previous conservation victories out there and the recovery that was possible after removing those animals. And we're in the home stretch, really thinking about removing the deer. Last question.
I have one.
From the peanut gallery.
The peanut. What is the 11th species that might be reclassified so it's going to be endemic?
Do you know Kyle Gunther?
Yeah.
He's in this chapter, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so his master's work at San Diego State looked at Xylococcus across the range, looked at population genomics of Xylococcus, and Xylococcus is totally genetically distinct on Catalina Island, and that's his work. So I think Uvia flores renteria at San Diego State is continuing that work, and my recommendation with the genetic pattern that they found would be to go ahead and describe it, even if you don't find corresponding morphological differences. But I don't think we've looked real hard for those. But genetically, it's very different.
Okay, let's do one more round of applause and then we'll do our announcement. So just an early announcement. We're not ready to do any sign-ups or anything, but CNPS Orange County will be hosting a field trip to the island this April. If you want to put it in your calendar, you can do that. It's April 26th and 27th. It'll be an overnighter. We'll leave out of Newport. We'll head over to Avalon. The Conservancy will pick us up. They'll take us around the island, show them everything that you just talked about. Well, maybe not everything. But they'll show us the island, they'll show us the plants, and then we'll come back Sunday evening on the last boat back. So we're not taking sign-ups tonight. We are taking bribes tonight. It's limited to CNPS members, so if you're not a member, you would do that. And it's limited to 15 people. That's why we're taking bribes. And we're not doing any little, notes in the pocket or anything like that. Nobody gets an unfair advantage. We'll announce it in a very democratic way we haven't figured out. It will probably just be announced in our email, I would assume. So, if you're not a member, you're not going to get that. So, be a member, watch the emails, and we'll have more news to come. It's not till April, so you've got time to figure it out. Anyway, that'll be a fun trip, so hope you can join us there. That's it for tonight. Enjoy. Thank you, Matt. Thank you for coming. Don't forget, field trip January 5th for mushrooms, if you want to do that one, you can still sign up. Good night.
That's how you have